Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where in the world you're joining us from. Welcome to our expert panel, Scaling AI, Designing Systems Built to Grow, brought to you by our friends at Skyflow, SAP, and Fivetran. I'm Jenna Holland, Director of Digital here at Data Science Connect, the world's largest data and AI ecosystem for enterprise leaders. Today, we're excited to welcome attendees from all around the world to explore what it takes to design AI systems that can scale, transforming promising pilots into reliable enterprise-wide solutions that deliver lasting business value. The path from prototype to production-grade AI isn't linear, it's architectural. As use cases grow more complex and expectations rise, so do the demands on your underlying systems. Scaling AI effectively means designing for modularity, reliability, observability, and performance from day one. In this webinar, we'll dig into the technical patterns that support AI at scale, from model deployment strategies and orchestration layers to real-time data pipelines and monitoring practices. We'll explore how to architect AI systems that don't buckle under growth, but get better with it. We're honored to hear from a distinguished panel of experts today. Shubham Trivedi, Digital Solution Advisor at SAP, Sanchit Srivastava, Senior Manager of Data Analytics at General Mills, Kelly Kohlheffer, Senior Director, Global Partner Engineering at Fivetran, and Joe McCarron, Head of Developer Advocacy from Skyflow. Before we begin, a few housekeeping items. To make this feel a little more in person, we suggest you add a photo to your profile and include your bio, LinkedIn profile, and other information you want your fellow attendees to see. Next, please take advantage of the Q&A and chat features in the right sidebar. We'll be addressing your questions throughout the webinar, so be sure to upvote the questions you'd like the panel to address. If you're wondering where your organization stands compared to others on your AI journey, check out the poll question in the right sidebar. And finally, to learn more about how to move from isolated AI initiatives to scalable enterprise-ready systems built for long-term growth, check out the calls to action below throughout the webinar from our sponsors. Now, without further ado, let's kick off our panel. Welcome to the stage.
Thank you.
Hey guys, how are you guys doing?
Fantastic.
Nice.
Great. Awesome. Well, first of all, welcome everyone. Today we are going to discuss scaling AI, designing systems built to grow. We have Kelly from Fivetran with us. We have Shubham from SAP and Joe from Skyflow. My name is Sanchit Srivastava. I'm a Senior Manager, Architecture and Analytics for General Mills, and I'll be moderating this webinar. Super excited to be with you guys today. Why don't we just go through quick introductions, and while you're doing that, guys, why don't you share your current roles and your focus area in AI and scaling AI in your respective organizations are. Kelly, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thanks, Sanchit. This is really a pleasure to be here, by the way. I've been looking forward to this one, not just to share some ideas, but also hopefully to learn quite a bit as well. I think it's a constant challenge right now. So Kelly Kohlheffer, I lead Global Partner Sales Engineering at Fivetran. I've been here 4 years. I tell people all the time, one simple reason why I'm at Fivetran. I was in data consultancy prior to my 4 years here, and I'd recommended Fivetran probably, 100, 125 times during that data consulting time in the previous 3 to 4 years prior to joining Fivetran. So I made it an easy transition when I moved from consulting back into product. I always tell people my story did not have to change. It just stayed the same. My team today in this current role, we enable consulting partners, strategic SIs, large GSIs, and then also our technology partners, Databricks, Snowflake, hyperscalers, how to build on Fivetran's data and AI infrastructure more effectively and kind of do it together. So that's a little bit on the background side for me. 3 things, I guess you ask, what am I focused on right now? I think the biggest one for me right now, just from a people standpoint, is how can I not only personally gain AI leverage, but how can I get AI leverage from my team? How can I put my team in position to kind of have that moment where they go, and I've had this a while back, wow, I think I can do anything with AI. When you think about pre-chat GPT, which was less than 4 years ago, which democratized everything. I think having that moment where you go, I think I can do anything now, really, really important. So that's one for me. I think trying to navigate the operational complexity of building with AI at scale as well, when you've got this complicated mix of tools, capabilities, data across the board that's constantly shifting. That's number two for me. And then the third one is, I'm talking a lot about it at the conference that I'm at this week, the fact that Fivetran, we've been talking about the modern data stack for, well, before I was here for the last 4 years, even before that. Uh, it was built for humans, right? I mean, I can't show a keyboard right now. I'm on my laptop, but me typing on my keyboard. And I think, whether it's a 10x, 100x, 1000x or more, agents now really are the primary data consumers. If they're not within your world, you have to assume that they are going to be. So those are the three areas for me I'm really focused on right now.
I think very appropriately great areas. Big fan of Fivetran, Kelly. Great tool to have. And I would say this, with greater AI power comes greater AI responsibility. So you are focusing on the right things. So that's great. Yeah. Let's move on to Shubham. Shubham, why don't you share your intro with us, your focus areas, and what are you, focusing on right now in terms of AI?
Yeah, so thank you, Sanchit, for having me. A great panel. Looking forward for a good discussion. So I'm Shubham Trivedi. I am a digital solution advisor at SAP. Been in the SAP ecosystem now for almost 10 years, both from a partner perspective and now on the product side. So by training, I'm a basis guy, but then I'm in pre-sales right now. So I've seen the full journey, on-prem, cloud, and now we are in agentic. So it's a third iterative loop for me. But that's the first part. And then what I do. But one thing that I've observed in all the three is the importance of data. And data is critical here. And data is what's powering your organizations to move to AI. So I help enterprises, enterprise customers and customers of corporate move AI from proof of concept to production at SAP, because companies and organizations of all sizes and scale are able to build that one AI proof of concept, but they don't know how to run 50 of them simultaneously without multiple things breaking. And that's a gap where I'm learning. So moving an idea on AI from a proof of concept to a full-fledged production without hiccups, so that customers can start consuming AI in the real sense. So that's a bit about me.
I think you are one of the good example why we are here. We are going to discuss all of it today, right? The modularity aspect, the scaling aspects, the observing aspects. So looking forward to hear more from you, Shubham. Thank you for sharing your intro. Joe, why don't you introduce yourself and your focus areas right now? Thank you.
Absolutely. Pleasure to be here. Thanks for the introductions, and I'm really looking forward to talking with all of you and learning from all of you as well. I'm Joe McCarron. I'm product lead and head of developer advocacy at Skyflow. As a company, we're focused on architecting accuracy preserving privacy and security solutions for agentic AI at scale. So we work with companies like ServiceNow, Walmart, GoodRx on fundamental data privacy and security challenges. And now we're bringing that to the world of AI with unstructured data detection, classification, tokenization, and security. So both the sort of security and governance components, as well as scaling, because we sit in the critical path on all of these agentic AI workflows. And then on the side, I'm also actually a founder and CTO of a little agentic AI startup. So I've got a little bit of hands-on development experience with these things as well.
That's great. Very good. Good to have you on the panel. That's great. I think we have a very diverse panel, right? We have someone who was focused on data consumption and now is helping a large organization like Fivetran to do that. Focus on AI. We have Shubham, who focus on SAP and enabling going at scale for AI systems. And we have Joe, who is not only a builder, but also trying to govern AI solutions pretty well. So that's great. My first question to you, and let's start with Kelly to you, is what are your key architectural elements, right? Which you propose if you have to move your AI application from a POV/POC to a scale, to at scale? Right? What are those key architectural components, your favorite key architectural components of that journey?
Yeah, no, appreciate it. Great question. I think that for me, two or three things that I look for, and full disclosure here, up until 3.5 years ago, I would not have considered myself at all a builder. I mean, I'm a classic go-to-market person, but I'm like I said in my intro, I almost feel like you can throw anything at me today, and I think I give it a pretty good shot with a few Claude codes sitting beside me. So I do want to put that out there. But I have built a lot in the last 3.5 years, and when I look at where we are today, I think agent native data access, but a human in the loop at the right point. We hear about human in the loop a lot. I can give you a quick example. So I don't know if you can see this. If I'm holding up, I wear an Aura ring. It measures all my biometrics, activities that I'm this week, mostly sitting and standing, not a lot of activity, but activity, sleep, readiness, stress levels, all those kind of things. And I've probably had this, I don't know, 3 or 4 years. I've been wearing the Aura ring. You got Apple Watch, a lot of ways to do this. It's my Aura ring stopped taking a charge probably 4 weeks ago, something like that. And sitting at the counter with my wife, and she said, "Oh, well, just open up on the support chat in the Aura app and get it resolved." And I'm thinking, well, as much as I'm into AI and support and moving things over, I said, okay, I'm probably going to get navigated over. Well, what ended up happening as soon as I got into the Aura chat agent, and I'm going to get to the human in the loop at the right point, all I had to say was, my ring is not taking a charge. That's it, nothing else. Immediately, that Aura agent went out, took a look at the telemetry on my ring, and within, I would say, 20 seconds, it said, "Kelly, your ring's broken. Number one, is this still your address? Number two, is this the proper ring color and size?" And I just went, yes and yes. There was no Aura person in the loop. I was the human in the loop. And to me, that was the key thing. So in less than 90, well, no, let me say 3 minutes, 120 seconds, less than 3 minutes, that whole thing was resolved. The case was closed in a day and a half later. I guess not the next day, but the following, I had this one. I had the new Aura ring sitting on my doorstep. And so I think that, there's a lot of architectural patterns in that personal example for me, but having me as the customer, as the human in the loop, I think is a really interesting one versus somebody on the backside, because that agent it was very focused. Number one, it was not a super agent, very focused agent, a clear scope. And the customer, was the human in the loop. And I can go into my philosophy for the last 2 years has been, don't build super agents, build focused agents. And I think that our example, kind of reinforced that to me. Last thing, real quick, and I'm talking about this a lot this week, is have your data accessible regardless of where your AI stack changes. Have that data accessible so that you're not moving it and migrating it around. And I know we're going to get into that in more detail in just a little while.
Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing, and congratulations on the ring. AI did well for you. That's great. Shubham, do you want to share some more insights around that?
So the question is, the three things that I consider non-negotiable.
Three architectural, the three components.
Okay, so I will first say the three stuff. Number one is your isolation boundaries. Then number two is having a model agnostic API interface. And the third is evaluation of your infrastructure, and I'll expand on each of them. So isolation boundaries is, you have to isolate so that one team's mess, because your AI architecture, it's not only one team that's working on it, multiple teams are working on it. So it should not happen that one team's mess becomes everyone's problem. So if everyone shares your same environment, same configuration, one misconfiguration by anyone, look, we are all learning, right? So one misconfiguration or one budget overrun by one team who runs a machine learning algorithm, and then it affects everybody. So you build governance in the foundation or you spend time retrofitting it 10 times over. So that's number one. Number two is an model agnostic API interface. And what do I mean by that? Your models should never require a rewriting of code. So whatever code is running at the top, it should be independent of the model running below it. So if you try to change the model, so as we see with this AI models coming up, they're getting upgraded. If you have to change your code, once the model gets changed, you're already creating a technical debt to begin with. You're already locked yourself. So your model should be, LLM agnostic. You should be able to change the code without disturbing the LLM below it, and vice versa. Third is what I see a lot is you cannot manage what you don't measure. So a lot of time companies and organizations go ahead with the live production data, deploying AI, and then they realize, oh, we just overspent, or we did not see so many token usage. So you cannot, AI failures, they happen silently. So the model will keep responding, but less accurately over time. So you need to build your evaluation not as an afterthought, but before you go live. So you need to be aware that, okay, I'm going to run this AI model. These many people are going to use it. These many tokens are going to be used on an average, and I need to budget this much for it. If you don't, the model comes to an abrupt halt. So three things: isolating your boundaries so that your production data and multiple teams are showing they stay safe. So an issue in one should not impact the other. Having a model agnostic, so not only they're separate, but they're agnostic, so you can change your LLM and code without any hiccups. And third is evaluating what is going to be the final end product before you actually go live. So these are my three non-negotiable architecture things. Yeah,
that's great. I love these components. That's great components. Joe?
Yeah, Shubham, I think you and I align on a lot of these things. I was going to touch on a couple specific architectural components sort of down the road, but I think when I think about scalability, I think you first have to cover reliability and predictability as sort of two principles. And that's where I start, right? In terms of reliability and predictability, you absolutely need observability. You need to be able to measure it. You need to be able to understand the impact of the changes that you're making. And your system needs to be built for graceful degradation. To Shubham's point, if the API changes, if one API goes down, is your whole system going to go down? If you've used Anthropic's APIs, you don't want their SLAs to be your SLA. You need to be able to have some fallbacks. You need to be able to have some redundancy. You need to be able to build your system for your users and not be completely dependent on one single vendor. You need to decide at what point in your agentic flow are you going to fail open versus fail closed, right? You need to sort of think about the entire system design. One thing that's really interesting that LLMs have sort of unlocked for us is you can actually give some error feedback to the agent and let the agent steer itself a little bit. I've seen this in some of the agents that we've built and helped customers build, where if the tool returns an agent, if the agent can't reach out to Google Drive or whatever it's connecting to, and it gets some information back about that error, it can steer itself to other tools. It can continue the loop. You shouldn't have to fail the loop if a single tool fails. I think that's a principle that more people need to adopt. And then really, and I'll talk more about this might be recency bias for me, but variable length loops in agents. I think we all started out building, chatbots, requests would return in, maybe 30 seconds, and we came from a world where a single HTTP request lasting a second was a long time. That was unacceptable a few years ago. Now we're having HTTP requests that are streaming data back for 15 minutes or longer. And so that fundamental thing you have to design around. And I think a lot of people are running into that right now. And they're building different systems, one real-time system and one background system. And I think thinking about the whole problem space and architecting for that, one system that can support variable length loops is really going to pay dividends.
Yeah, makes sense. Great points altogether. I'll ask next question probably, Shubham, to you, right? Because you spoke about isolation a lot, right? So is isolation only restricted to like teams and environments, or do you see a modularity component also part of the superset of isolation? Do you think that code modularity or feature modularity is important to scale AIs and in large organizations?
Yeah, so I think the isolation has to be done. So the modularity has to be done even at, not only at the team level, but even at the code level. So
Yeah.
your grounding module has to create an output variable.
Mhm.
That output variable is consumed by your prompt. And that template doesn't care where the grounding comes from. It can come from a SharePoint, can come from a data sphere, or it can come from a vector table. And the
Mhm.
model should not care about what the prompt template contains. So each element that I just talked about is independently replaceable. So not only at the team level, but also at the layers below have to be independently replaceable.
Got it.
What happens is when these components are truly loosely coupled, right? You can version and deploy each one of them based on their own release cycle. So like you said, the SLA of Anthropic does not become your SLA. Is when you have these loose couples, so Anthropic goes down for some reason, you can immediately put a codex in the place. That's how loose. But if changing your LLM or changing your grounding source impacts your prompt, there's a problem. So it is like a Lego block built in a perfect manner, where removing one and adding a new Lego block should not disturb the Lego blocks above and below. You should be able to safely remove it and add another one. So I think a Lego block is something which I would say placed one top of another and easily replaceable. And that's how I would call it modular and loosely coupled. And you can make these Lego towers for each team you work with. So that's how I would say that.
That's great. Yeah. Joe, Kelly, anything to add on this? This is a great analogy.
I love that. I love the Lego block analogy. And honestly, so for most of my career, I've been a product manager or product leader for APIs and developer interfaces. So I've spent my career preaching this idea of, contracts and interfaces and versioning. And it's just become so much more true now with agents. It's not a new idea, but it's become much more critical now. And so the other thing I'll add is, you have to build in that evaluation, as Shubham was mentioning before, and you have to know if you swap out, Anthropic for Codex, how is that going to change the output? And do you actually need to change your prompt such that you get the same output from these different models or a comparable output? And so making sure that every piece of the system is modular and replaceable and that you own the interfaces. You're not just taking whatever interface the vendor provides, an OpenAI compatible API, an Anthropic API. You need to have your own abstractions, your own contracts.
Makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Kelly?
For me, yeah, a couple of 3 points. I got to say, when Claude goes down, I just go get coffee or something. I mean, I'm not swapping in anything at the moment, but no, great points. I think too, to what Joe mentioned with the model change, I have definitely found that even when, let's say, a vendor comes out with a new model, hey, this is the latest and greatest, the best. Fable was only out for a couple of days there, but let's say going from the current version of Opus or the previous to the next, I found it was almost like a regression back on some of the agents that I had built around that model, kind of going to what Shubham talked about with model agnostic, but also code agnostic. And again, that's been a bit of a struggle. You go, well, this is the latest and greatest model. I should be getting very same results from the same model provider. And I have not found that yet. It's well, better reasoning, et cetera. But the things I'm expecting have been different. So a couple of comments there. But the thing I wanted to talk about, I guess, from a data standpoint for me, and talking about modularity, I want to have flexibility and I want to have standardization, but I want to have flexibility at the data level. And I think when you look at what, say, Fivetran has done traditionally, moving data into a cloud data platform, and we've done this for 8,000 customers over the years. When it goes into a platform, as good as that platform is, as good as the data and agentic framework is around that platform, it is in that platform. And so there's another way to think about modularity from a data standpoint, where if I can move that into where I can move at one time, 800 sources, whatever that is, whatever my agents need to operate off of. And this also goes into I think either Joe or Shubham talked about not being dependent on one tool, opening up some paths. But if I've got that data sitting there, let's say in a bronze raw layer, where if I've got open formats, let's say Iceberg, Delta, Parquet, in any compute engine or any agentic framework that's able to talk Iceberg or Delta or Parquet can operate off of the same data, that gives me not only flexibility, but a lot of standardization. So just simply, if I'm executing 6 queries across 6 different compute engines or with 6 different agents and 6 different platforms on that same data set, about the only thing that's going to have to change is my from statement, which is kind of that catalog pointer to get me to that external data. So I think that's a really big one when you start talking about where is my data going to land. Last comment, and again, I think it was Joe talking about this tool loop. I experienced that exact thing you're talking about. I had an agent that I had built that my number one, my semantic view did not support the question that I asked of the agent. Number two, I didn't even have the data in a framework where if the semantic view had been right, the data was not even there. But because I had an MCP server tool set available directly to the API and that data source, the agent went around that limitation, grabbed it, and probably 20 seconds later, I had the answer. So I loved what you talking about when you talked about that, not having a single tool, having that agent dependent on a single tool, open up multiple paths.
That's great. That's great. Yep. That is good. So you brought up data, Kelly, right? There's all kind of data in the industry, right? We do a batch, we do real time, we do, all kind of ingestion happens, right? Streamings. How does an organization who are implementing AI at scale, right? What are the different orchestrators they should think about? What are the different patterns they should think about?
Yeah, it's gotten to be what I've seen, what I've observed working with clients, and then the things that I'm building. Um, we do not have patience anymore for waiting around, right?
Yep.
Everybody that I talk to and myself, I mean, I want things immediately. And I think either Joe or Shubham talked a little bit about these, web fetches, which are taking, 2 or 3 minutes, but also on the other side of that, what's actually going on in the background. From my standpoint, I think there's that latency aspect that, whether I almost feel like the problems we've been trying to solve, regardless of the data workload. You think about classic data warehousing or building data applications or building more traditional AI and ML systems. I mean, this democratized AI and agentic AI that we're building for now, I still need as real time, as fresh of data as I can possibly get, and data that I can trust. It's no different than, decade ago where we worried about a dashboard giving, providing wrong answers, wrong metrics. Today, if you're rolling out agentic AI, even on a limited scale within your organization, and the trust factor is not there because the data is not fresh enough, then that becomes a huge problem. So I think you start thinking about change data capture. You think about some of the things like Joe mentioned earlier about what kind of paths can I open up for this agent, and then what are the security and governance parameters around those paths as well. So, and then lastly for me, I think, again, I talk about the concept of not trying to create super agents. I think all those things that I talked about, if you can focus your agent around a business problem, a workflow with a specific set of tools, then those things become a little bit easier to solve, even with all the movement that we have in the industry right now.
Yep. Sounds great. I think appropriate statements there, right? So Shubham, Joe, anything to add here?
I have a different, I would say that you stop treating real time and batch orchestration as two different architectures. You put them on the same pipeline logic with two execution modes. And teams that have started doing this, uh, they stand to gain because highest optimization comes through semantic catching, because it stores and retrieves your data based on its meaning and context. So rather than just exact keywords, right? So, and if you look at in the enterprise and even in corporate environments where this data is building, 70% of the queries are variations of already things that I've already asked. So let's say we are talking of agents here, right? So an HR agent, what would you like to talk about? How many leaves you got? When is your how many leaves do you have national holidays, or maybe when do I apply, how many sick leaves I have? Now these are some of these are typical standard questions. So with semantic catching, what happens is this context is already saved, so you get the quick answers and you eliminate some of those LLM calls. Now this has a other effect where you don't have to spend your tokens, you don't have to spend your LLM usage. It can be used by your R&D team, or maybe asking some very difficult calls for which LLM would be required. So I think my takeaway is simple: stop treating them as two different architecture, but consider them as doing the same pipeline logic but two execution modes. So if, let's say, you want to get a quarterly report of, let's say, last year, that can be put as a batch. But let's say you need what sales you did in the last 2 days, that can be taken as a real time. So I think we should just look at what output is required at what time and what's the priority of the output required. If I need some output right now versus something that can wait, and that can come as an auto email into my mailbox. So yeah, that's how I look at it.
Got it. Yeah.
I would
Joe?
give a big +1 to that. I actually wanted you to go first because I was curious if you would say the same thing, because I agree. I think you have to design the experience and then build for that. And you think about the user experience. I mean, everyone who's used ChatGPT and Claude knows, sometimes I want it to take 30 minutes and build an in-depth research report, or I want it to, ship a whole feature. And then sometimes I want to ask a follow-up question and I want a quick response. I don't want to have to go to two different interfaces, two different places, two different agents that are optimized for these two different tasks. I want one interface, and I want that interface to then, maybe it needs to kick off a long-running background task. Maybe it can be routed to a quick, a small model that can just answer my question with the context it already has. And so you really have to think about that experience, the primitives you have, and then design the system around it so that you're not shipping that architecture and the boundaries that you see on your side to your users and letting that show up in your user experience.
Makes sense. Makes sense. I mean, what Shubham mentioned reminds me of Lambda architecture, where you are essentially event triggering or streaming stuff, but you have a batch reconciliation process, right? Just to make sure that your stream is doing good. So I like the statement that stop treating them as different architecture. So that's a pretty bold statement. Great. Moving on, and this is probably Joe in your territory, right? So I know Skyflow does a lot of governance around unstructured data. Governance is very close to observability, not exactly observability, but still plays a role in it. So what do you think, right, are the key observability components, right, for an AI application which is widely used, pretty scalable, and is trusted? What are the key indicators to observe such an application?
Yeah, well, I mean, when we're talking about scale, one of the things that LLMs and agentic AI bring into this conversation are the quality evals, right? It's not something that we had to deal with in the world of observability before, is this highly deterministic or non-deterministic output from agents and how that affects our user experience. So I think probably the most important thing is to get your evals right from the beginning, to set up automated evals to make sure that you understand what good looks like from this agent in this context, right? And to be able to measure that and test that. That flows through all of the questions that we're talking about: re-architecture questions, data access questions, all of it. On the security and privacy side, you need kind of the traditional observability stack. You need to understand what's being accessed. You need to understand who's accessing it. You need to understand why, is the thing that I would layer on that I think most people are not addressing today, especially with agents and with our global privacy frameworks. I mean, if you actually look at GDPR, right, every access to covered data has to have a justification. You have to say what you're going to do with it and why you're justified in accessing this data. And so being able to log that, agents give us a really useful primitive in that the agent can actually generate that structured log. It can give its reason for why it's accessing data. It can explain its thinking. You need to capture that. You need to capture what data it's accessing in what context, and then you need to have an automated loop that feeds that back into your governance, right? If an agent is actually accessing data that it shouldn't have access to, you need to be able to not wait for a human to review that. You need to be able to lock that access down promptly.
Yeah, makes sense, right? Kelly, Shubham, anything to add here? Key observability aspects for AI applications.
Kelly, I would like, you want to go first or up to you?
Yeah, no, just quick comment. I mean, I loved everything Joe said there. I think that, for me, it's been about not just that output, but what was the data that the agent used? What did it access? What were the tools that it called? Obviously, a lot, like Joe talked about, the security and governance around that. And then what was the confidence expressed at each step of the process? And I guess I have found that, if anything is off, an agent, a model, that entire framework can still be very, very confident. Oh yeah, Kelly, this is right. I've got this down. And it's not even until I question that agent, say, hey, well, what about, oh yeah, you're right. So this, again, just kind of looking from a user standpoint, this ability to have this supreme overconfidence in any scenario kind of leads back into what we were talking about with these foundations around everything, and ensuring that we know exactly what that agent is basing those decisions off of, because they're so confident they want to please you, right? So I've seen that happen. It's still something that with everything I'm building today, I'm still, working with, and it's nice when you get it down, but then something changes too. So that overconfidence issue with observability for me.
Yeah, makes sense. Shubham?
So I would like to add on what Joe and Kelly said. So definitely, I would first start at the basic level as the infrastructure. Is the system running today? We take it for granted, but yeah, it's definitely a first step. Is your AI infrastructure first of all running? A lot of times, we take monitoring as like automated, so we don't. But definitely but the second one, I think, which Joe and Kelly did go very deep about, is the model quality. Now, is it answering well? Now, that's where your BERT score, your ROG score, all those scores come into it. So that helps you whether the model quality is good. But the third one, which a lot of teams skip, is the pipeline. Now, the pipeline is your enterprise data being used, or it's hallucinating? And how do you check that? Is your groundedness. So you definitely put some documents in the groundedness. So did the model's answer come from the documents you gave? And did it, most importantly, not only did the documents were the ones which you gave, but did it choose the right documents? So you're going to give a big chunk of the documents, but not only it has to choose the document, but choose the right document. So and that is measured in your RAG groundedness. So if you are not measuring that in production, you know your AI is not grounded. So three things I would just put at it. I think infrastructure is one, model quality we have talked a lot about, and the pipeline looking at your RAG groundedness, so whether the right documents and the right data is being. So that's how you prevent hallucination. Yeah, that's my take.
Go ahead, Jeff.
I'm curious, Shubham, what do you think about LLM as judge versus sort of deterministic evaluations for situations like that? Like, I know a lot of people will do their own annotated data sets, with this question, it should pull this document. Is that kind of where you would focus, or would you also involve?
So the good part about SAP AI Launchpad is that you do have all these charts and everything out there. So I really have to go into my Launchpad and choose LLM as a judge or deterministic, and I even can see various parameters given to me. So if you ask me as a which model do you prefer? I'll be like, let me go into my orchestration layer and see which one is making the best sense. So that's something which SAP's AI Launchpad does it for me. So I would definitely go with that. Based on the model that I've selected initially, it gives me an entire data set, and then I can choose which I want to go with.
Yeah, Joe, for me.
Yeah.
So I was just going to say, Joe, for me on that question, I have been either shrinking or expanding I call it the probabilistic perimeter around a deterministic core for an agent. And it really gets interesting as you expand or shrink that and some of the output that you get there. So great question that you asked. don't have if you're a software company, you don't have a good REST API today, but beyond that, if you're not opening up that REST API to a CLI, MCP, so to me, it's a really interesting transition that we're in at the moment. And I think all of us that are in the software world today, we're going to be thinking about that and how are we going to look in 6 months or 12 months from an agent perspective, thinking from the perspective of an agent.
Yep, makes sense. Shubham?
So I have a little contrary view. I believe we'll be going into a multi-agent orchestration. And I'll tell you why, because a single prompt, let's say I want to know what's my quarterly profit for this particular customer last quarter. Now, instead of having one agent doing everything, you can have that one agent saying, okay, I need the financial data from the finance AR AP agent. I can get the customer data from the customer specific agent, and they can come together and do that. Now, this leads to my second part is that this will give rise to model routing structure, wherein the cheaper, you can have the simpler, you can have for simple prompts, you can have the cheaper model. So if I just need, for example, not the financial data, but the name of the customer and where is this customer based on in my previous example, I don't have to use my fancy AI agent. I can use my cheaper model to just get that. Right. And how do you ensure that these things work together, making sure you get the right information? That LLM as a judge model where each model evaluates the other. So that's how you can, take this multi-agent where you can, as a user, you're just entering one prompt. You don't worry about, I'm taking one agent or 10 agents. And then within those agents finding, okay, this task can be done by a cheaper model. And then you save some money and save some processing power. And then you make these agents basically do a feedback loop, check on one another. So I think these are the three things, but interconnected where I see going forward. Yeah.
Makes sense. No, this is definitely an architecture out there. Yeah, successful. I mean, I think what Kelly was saying was he's still trying to figure out the success in it, but you're right. This is where the industry is heading. Yeah. Joe?
I think the thing I'm most excited about as a API nerd is standardization and what Kelly talked about, that opening up an API is now becoming critical for businesses. This is something, we used to preach about all the time, is that you should have an API for everything your product can do. Mixed success in convincing product leaders and other people to embrace that vision. Not anymore, right? You have to have those robust primitives. And, Kelly, you were talking about MCPs and CLIs and REST APIs. When you have a REST API with a good open API schema that describes everything, you can derive everything else from that.
That's right.
Get the fundamental design right, get that contract right, and then you can build a lot off of it. So even if we didn't have AI, I'd be really excited about the current rise in API contracts, exposing APIs.
Yep. We've got a few questions, so let's just address those two. Good questions overall. The first one is, what is that one common scaling mistake that you would want teams which are new to AI to avoid? Shubham, you want to take a shot on it?
So I think
common mistake. Yeah,
one common mistake is having the governance as the back part, right? You start with governance at the first. Get your governance platform. It is not your software as a service. It's an iPaaS, infrastructure platform as a service, and you build that. So I'm going to assign this much for development, this much for my production, rather than doing this as an afterthought. So for those who are starting their journey in AI, think from a platform point of view and go forward, because coming backwards is going to do a lot of redoing of work. So that's my takeaway.
Makes sense. Yep. Joe, you raised your hand. Yeah.
You're practically pitching Skyflow for me, so I won't even touch on that. But I will give one hot take, which is I think too many teams optimize into smaller agents before they need it. I think, yes, you need to enable sub-agents and potentially multi-agent architectures, but do that on a need basis, right? It's an optimization. And so if your main agent is getting too big and too bloated and quality drops, then start to factor it out. I think too many people start from, I need a specific agent for everything, and then how do I bring them all together? And that leaves them stuck.
Great. Yeah. I think the next question is a good fit for you, Kelly, because Fivetran obviously very popular use across multiple regulated industries like finance and healthcare, right? How do these regulated industries scale AI without reinventing governance? Like, how do they do it? It's a different kind of governance.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think for me, it goes back to something I think I've alluded to a couple of times. I think that you want to put, especially when you're talking about scalability, you want to put yourself in a position where you own and control your data. Now, data is one part of this whole agentic flow that you've got, but it is a really, really key part. And I feel like if that data is locked up in a single platform, then it becomes really, really challenging to get the value that you want out of this. So I would say make sure you own and control your data. There are multiple ways to do that. We've got a great way to do it at Fivetran, but when I talk to people today, and the things that I build today as well, it just becomes so important to be able to give me the flexibility and optionality that I want, whether it's a regulated industry or an industry that is not quite at that level. I still need that. I want standardization, but with the necessary optionality and flexibility. And I think owning your data, controlling your data is a big part of that.
Makes sense. No, data has always been important. Now important than ever, right? So let's just say that. Okay, lightning round. 1 minute each. We're almost wrapping up. What's your top design principle when you are building an AI system at scale? Let's start with Joe. You.
I was going to list two, but I'll go with one, which is healthy skepticism. Honestly, I think there's a lot of trends, there's a lot of fads, there's a lot of new things that people rush into. And you may have heard it through a lot of my answers. It's, build what you need to deliver the experience that you want, not because it's the cool new trend and, you saw it posted somewhere, or, Anthropic is pushing sub-agent teams that consume 1 million tokens for a single task. Build what you need and maintain a healthy skepticism. And then the next one is just robust primitives, contracts, like we talked about.
Yeah, I was expecting contracts. Right, Shubham, how about you?
So my top design principle for AI would be governance is your architecture, because if you cannot enforce it at the foundation level, you can't bolt it up at scale. So that's my top design principle. Yeah.
Great. Yeah. Kelly.
Yeah, for me, it is deterministic foundation with a limited or controlled probabilistic perimeter, with a data foundation that can last, a data foundation engineered to last. That would be my best recommendation.
Perfect. And I'll probably steal governance and universality of data, and potentially context too, because context is the new money in addition to data going forward. So it was pleasure talking to you all. This was a great discussion. I learned a lot. So heard some really, really good thoughts. Hopefully the audience also enjoyed it. Thank you for all your time, Kelly, Shubham, and Joe. We'll be wrapping up now.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Right. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you guys for a great panel.
Yeah. Bye, guys.
And thank you all for joining us today. Great insights from those four. If you missed any of the webinar or want to rewatch anything, the recording will be available a few minutes after if you refresh this page. Thank you again to our partners at Fivetran, SAP, and Skyflow. We'll see you next time, and don't forget to join us for our session tomorrow on building the data foundation for agentic AI.